Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the state Republican Party, as well as the county chair for the Suffolk County Republicans. We're going to be joined in our second segment by Gerard Kassar, who's a state chairman of the Conservative Party of the state of New York. Jesse, when you and I put together the list of topics, as we've said before, it literally changes day by day, sometimes in a half day, sometimes by the hour. But it seems to me the big story of the last week has been the Trump search warrant. And I'm very concerned about that. Let me share my thoughts, and I'd like your opinion. Number one, I think this is a search warrant that never should have been issued. It was totally unnecessary. There was an outstanding grand jury subpoena, with what we call in the business subpoena ducis tecum, which is fancy Latin for a document demand by subpoena. They were complying. There was ongoing negotiations and discussions between the former president's lawyers and the Department of Justice. They should have just gone down that path. Why the FBI and why Garland thought that this was a good idea and wouldn't divide the country even further and raise real issues about the credibility and the trustworthiness of both the FBI and the Justice Department is beyond me. To me, it smacks of political harassment. I've taken the position on Cats at Night in discussions with various guests we've had that this is a subpoena-only matter. It never should have been a search warrant. And most importantly, since you use a search warrant, and for a search warrant, you need probable cause. And to show probable cause, you need an affidavit. This affidavit should be released. These are too important an issue to keep suppressed. You don't get real information out of the search warrant itself. It's a generic document. I tell you that, having done about 1,000 search warrants as a criminal court and later Supreme Court justice, and having been a law clerk to a federal judge, having worked on those, and having been an assistant attorney general, having issued search warrants through law enforcement. I do not believe it was necessary to have a search warrant. But since they chose to go down this route, which I believe, as I said, is divisive, then it's very, very important that the American people know what's behind the search warrant. Who was making out the allegations? What's their credibility? Is there any evidence to support this? Or is this just another phony investigation like we've had before, which will lead us down a path of upending the midterm elections, 2, upending the presidential election of 2024, putting a cloud over Donald Trump once again, unjustified, just like the Russian collusion hoax was unjustified based on fabricated documents funded by the Democrats that they fed to the FBI, and the FBI ran with it, and that was a Russian collusion. Then you had 2 impeachments of a sitting president, undermined the presidency, hurt the country, and most of all, we have outside enemies, Jesse, who are waiting to take us apart, and we're being divided. What say you?
I completely agree with you, Your Honor. I don't believe that this search warrant should have been issued. It should have been gone through the negotiation of issuing a subpoena and lawyers handing over documents as they were doing previous to this thing. You made it. You said it best, and it triggered something inside of me when you said it, because I felt it, I've heard it, but you put a name to it. This was a very divisive action by the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And let me just point out here that in the angst of Republicans questioning the politicizing of the DOJ and the FBI, we're not speaking of the rank and file agents of the FBI. We're talking about the leadership of the FBI, the politicians that are there. And we know that from the Obama administration into the Trump administration, that those politicians at the leadership levels of the FBI had an agenda. They started carrying it out. They even wanted to try and trap and record the president without his knowledge in several meetings. So we know that goes on. There have been hearings about that. We know that this Russia scandal was a sham. And now we go forward with this. And I think you pointed out, worse than anything else, this is dividing the country, because now we're polarized. From a political point of view and political philosophy. But now it's drawing into question the very basic institutions that we rely upon in terms of our republic, the Department of Justice, the IRS, the FBI. No one ever liked the IRS to begin with, but because we've seen politicians weaponize this situation. And honestly, what I've been getting at the doors, as we've been walking door to door in different general election walking and primary walking, is that if they could do this to Donald Trump or a former president, what are they going to do to us? We have no recourse. The government's got all the money. We would have to, individuals would have to be scared that the government's going to come down and bash down their door. We've seen that happen in Moscow. And we've seen that happen in Iran and all these totalitarian states. This never should have been. It never should have occurred. It is bad for the Republic. It is bad for the Democrats, and it's bad for the American people. And it's bad for the American justice system.
Well, and then let's just briefly take a look at this so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which I respectfully submit is a consumer fraud. I mean, they should bring an investigation by the Federal Trade Commission under Section 5 for consumer fraud on this, because it's going to increase taxes. It's all Green New Deal, sweetheart funding. It will injure manufacturing and pharmaceutical industries. It will be inflationary. It will build the deficits up more. It will harm investors and companies because they're now going to tax stock buybacks, which is a good thing if you're a shareholder, because that means there's more money to be paid out in dividends and paid out to fewer people. And it's good for companies because they're buying stock back cheaper, so they don't have to pay off dividends. It's a bad idea, this Inflation Reduction Act. But the worst part of this Inflation Reduction Act, I respectfully submit, is the fact they're going to spend in excess of $80 billion, Jesse, and hire somewhere between 83 and 87,000 new agents. And they did a posting until somebody had enough brains to pull it back, saying they wanted to know whether these people who are applying to be these new 87,000 agents, they're going to be the people who are going to be armed and were willing to use deadly force. Why are IRS agents being armed and using deadly force? I mean, what is that about, Jesse?
This is the same old story. They're utilizing Democrats. If it moves, they want to tax it. And now when you offer some dissent, they want to arm the government against the population. Think about that. Why does an IRS agent need to be armed? You know who needs to be armed? Border guards. Border officers need to be armed. We need more of them. Let's take more. Instead of IRS agents, let's put more border officers on to protect us from fentanyl, from gangs, from criminals, from terrorists. You know who needs to be armed? Trained security at our schools to ensure that our kids are safe. That's what we need. We need to take these resources and put them into our law enforcement. Instead of defunding the police, let's give them more funding so that they can keep us safe in dealing with this cashless bail, another failed policy of the Democrats, both in Albany and in Washington. And you're right. They slapped a nice name on it, but it does nothing. All this is, this boondoggle is just a venue and an avenue for them to advance their failed Green New Deal policies. It's costing us an excess of 30,000 jobs. It doesn't get us any closer to being energy independent. It doesn't affect the inflation because it increases the deficit. And you know who's going to be paying this? The middle-class family members here of Long Island and New York.
Well, as John Catsimatidis says on Cats at Night, he said, we have perhaps in the whole country 1,000 billionaires. So if you want to go after the billionaires because you think they're not paying their fair share, and that's an assumption not based on fact, but let's assume that you think there's an issue there. So hire 1,000 people to do an audit of the billionaires. The problem with government agencies is they all have to justify their existence. So if you hire 83 or 86 or 87,000 new people, Jesse, every day they have to go out and they have to justify their existence. And who they can descend upon? The small business people, the backbone of this country, the waiters, the cab drivers, the guys who have the shops on Main Street. I mean, they're going to go after people with W-2s. A W-2 speaks for itself. So
absolutely.
It's
I remember
ridiculous.
being a young man, working my way through college, and I bartended and waited on tables during that period of time. And I'm the one who got audited. I'm the individual who got audited. Here, a young waiter in college trying to pay his way through college. I'm the one that the IRS back then audited. They didn't go after, IBM. They didn't go after these big companies. They went after average Americans, those Americans who are in the streets just trying to work out a living and raise their families, or in my case back then, to earn their degree. I mean, fortunately, nothing came of it, but I still had to go through the angst, the expense of protecting myself from the government. And that's what now they're doing that on steroids through this boondoggle of a bill, of a law now.
No, it's horrifying. And frankly, I am very disappointed in two senators who I was thinking well of for the longest time, Sinema of Arizona and Manchin of West Virginia. I don't know why they changed their position. They were against raising taxes, and this is going to raise taxes. They're worried about excessive government spending as being an inflationary cause and a deficit builder. And yet, when push came to shove, they fell in line, which makes it so important to remember the big problem that happened in the last election. The last election of 2020, when the Republicans lost both those Senate seats in Georgia. And I said this on the radio, I said this in conversations with John Catsimatidis. I said, they're making this terrible mistake. If you don't have the Senate in the hands of the Republicans, and all you needed to win was one seat, Jesse, that the Republican Party was going to be in trouble, Trump was going to be in trouble, but more importantly, the country was going to be in trouble. You needed to have balanced government, having both houses of the Congress and having the White House in the hands of one party, and that one party is being dominated and manipulated by their far left, is a very dangerous thing, and it didn't have to happen. All the Republicans needed to do was to hold one Senate seat in Georgia. And we can talk about this a little bit more with Mr. Kassar when he comes on, but I'm very afraid that 2022 is not going to be nearly as good for the Republican Party and balanced government as everybody's predicting. I'm very skeptical about this language. This will be a great red wave. I think the Republicans will win the House. I think they're not going to win the Senate. They may lose important seats in the Senate. And again, I always preface my comments by saying, and I'm the House Democrat. And people say to me, you're the Democrat. How come you want to see more Republicans in office? I'm saying because my party has been taken away from me, from the common sense Democrats. It's in the hands of radical leftists who do not understand government or public policy or economics or politics or the external threats we face or the divisiveness of what's going on. You need to have a countervailing voice. That countervailing voice now has to be the Republican Party. It's not going to be a third party, Jesse. It's got to be the Republican Party. And that's why I'm upset about what's what's going on. Because I could tell you right now, there's several seats that the Republicans need to hold on to that are at risk. One is Pennsylvania, one is Ohio, one is Wisconsin. Okay? And that's really a problem. And you have particularly in the state of Pennsylvania. Jesse, do you know who's running as a Democratic candidate for the Senate in Pennsylvania? An extreme radical left guy named Fetterman, who's lieutenant governor, who wants to legalize all drugs, Jesse. Can you imagine that? He wants to legalize all drugs. What does that mean? Does that mean heroin? Does that mean fentanyl? What does that mean?
It's bad for our communities. It's bad for our kids. That's what that means. And I agree with you. I think that no matter what, these elections were going to be a fight. And this is just setting the Republicans up to ensure that we don't rest on the laurels or the headlines or the clippings of being lulled to a false sense of security, and we're going to have a red wave. Now, red waves are created by communicating with voters and hard work. We created a red wave in Suffolk County, and I know they did in Nassau, in Long Island, by doing the hard work that's needed to communicate with voters. What you just said, that the Democratic nominee for Senate in Pennsylvania wants to legalize all drugs. That's what we need to do. So if this is an alarm bell that tells all of us, whether you're sitting on the couch, whether you're sitting working or whatnot, that it's time for us to rise up and continue to create the wave that we need to save this republic and change the direction of this country. And let's not be mistaken. What you just described, what was going down in Washington with these boondoggles of legislation and bailout packages and such, and the Green New Deal that's going to cost jobs and raise taxes on people. They have a test bed here in New York where one-party rule has been in place since the Republicans lost the Senate in 2018. And the Democrats have been running unchecked from that period of time. And that's what gave us cashless bail. That's what gave us more tax increases. That's what gave us two governors that believe that they're dictators, Cuomo, who's corrupt, and now Hochul, who's out of touch, that are leading this state down a path of a far left path that's going to hurt small businesses and the middle-class families. Think about it. In all this, with inflation being what it is, Hochul thinks it's important that we change the terminology of inmate to incarcerated person. How ludicrous is that?
Absolutely. Well, Kevin just gave me that high sign. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. I'm with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We're going to be taking a short break. When we come back, we're going to have Gerard Kassar, who's the chairman of the State Conservative Party, and we're going to get his views about the state of New York State and the upcoming elections in November, as well as next week's primary for the state Senate and Congress. We'll be right back.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes, my gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit theupsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
We're back. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, as well as the Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. And we are honored and privileged today to have a very distinguished guest, the Chairman of the State Conservative Party, Gerard Kassar. Jesse, would you be kind enough to introduce Mr. Kassar?
Sure. Jerry Kassar is a dear friend of mine, and we've known each other in politics and in government since 1994 when we were working. We first met on an upset assembly race that we did during the Pataki victory, where we elected an assemblywoman and knocked off a 20-year Democratic incumbent there in the state assembly. And throughout the years, both in government and politics, our lives have intersected several times. And a brilliant political mind, a brilliant man when it comes to philosophy, and it's great to have him here to get his point of view, his 30,000 foot view of what the state of the state is. So, Chairman Jerry Kassar of the State Conservative Party, thank you so much for joining us here in the Long Island Report.
Well, you're very welcome. And first, let me just say to you that some of my happiest times were actually involved in those early days doing a lot of grassroots work in Suffolk County. I mean, that was Deborah Mazzarelli, that race. And there were many, many races, many fantastic people in Suffolk County that I had an opportunity to work with over a number of years. I live in Brooklyn. I live in Bay Ridge. You know, it can be in the summer a bit of a problem getting into Suffolk, but generally speaking, it was a quick ride, whether I was operating out of Islip or whether I was operating out of the Sag Harbor area. So those were very memorable times. As far as New York State is concerned, there is really no measurement where you would not conclude that the GOP and conservative parties are going to have a good year. I mean, I think the question becomes, are we going to have a good year, a very good year, or an off-the-charts year? Mike and Jesse and others are working under a belief that, unfortunately, in a way, due to incredibly inept Democratic policies in the state, we are actually going for all of it, the ball of wax, as they say. We're going for the whole thing, and that involves governor, and that involves many state legislative seats, congressional seats, and assembly seats. Now, you would expect me to have a partisan position, but this is why I think we are on the right track, and it's basically because you don't have to do a poll, you don't have to do a canvass, you don't have to do any of those things to know that people in this state are incredibly upset with crime and inflation and the economy. And inasmuch as that on a statewide level and in D.C., we are not in power at this point in time, there's really no one else to blame but the Democrats. Now, I believe we will do, because of our positions on issues, an exceptionally better job. But people tend, in my view, to want to know that the candidates we're running can manage a situation, also tend to vote against what they know is not working out. And the crime and the inflation are clearly, I think most people know that Republicans will do a far better job on crime, whether it be the bail reform or the fact that you don't have to go to a Republican politician and actually ask them if they are for or against defunding police. You know where it is. If you've got to start asking Democrats that question, I know that they have a problem. So do you want me to make some educated I don't look at my stuff as educated guesses, frankly, but I want to, if you'd like, I can give you my own view of where we are going, or maybe we want to have other pieces of a discussion at this point. Whatever you gentlemen like.
Jesse, what do you say?
I think we should, let's get your view of that. Let's continue with this discussion along that way and where you think we're going to end up.
Well, and in some of this, Jesse, you should feed right into because a lot of it involves Long Island. I mean, I believe that essentially every state legislative seat on Long Island, not everyone, but essentially everyone is going to end up Republican after this particular year. I think you've got two, but you do have the issues going for you, and you do have a bunch of bad Democratic votes, but you also managed in both Suffolk and Nassau to come up with a high-quality set of candidates. Now, it is politics. Everything doesn't always work out. But with your recent history, really a little more than a cycle. Everybody talks about a cycle. But in Suffolk County, you've been performing really exceptional for several cycles. I would really predict that most every state legislative seat ends up our way, and I'm going to be very straight with you. I think we're going to end up with 4 congressional seats on the island when you include the outgoing Rice seat, and you include Santos, and you certainly have, Garbarino, and I believe because of your efforts, Lolota and Suffolk. So, I think you end up with 4 seats, and that is a pickup on Long Island. I do think that the city is different. I don't see any reason why Nicole Maliotakis wouldn't win again in a landslide, frankly. She just is a super incumbent. And, we do have some, and I do think we actually are going to pick up 1 or 2 assembly seats in the city. I'm not sure about Senate seats, but I do believe we're going to pick up 1 or 2 state assembly seats in the city. But more importantly in the city is this. So let's flip over to the governor's race for just a moment. They always play with these stats, whether you need 28% or 32% or 31% to elect a statewide governor. And I think we do know that Lee Zeldin is the perfect candidate for city residents to get behind because he is kind of in the general area, knowing city issues coming out of Suffolk County. I think it's also because of intense mismanagement in the city, where a lot of people are looking for a mechanism to come, people have to leave the city. And frankly, 400,000 people did leave the city. And those 400,000 people, many of them are Democratic voters. I guess some ended up in the Hamptons, but are Democratic voters who in turn will cause Lee to be much, much more competitive in the city. And recent polling, admittedly done by the Zeldin organization, but polling that I've had a chance to look at pretty closely, indicates that 32%. Lee is heading towards 32, 33% right now, which is a sufficient vote for him to become governor in the city. I want to remind people that when we did those propositions last year and opposed those propositions, the Conservative Party, we won New York City. It wasn't close. We won New York City on those propositions which reflected Republican conservative ideology.
Those propositions, if I could just remind the listeners, those dealt with first day
election day voting,
no excuse absentee balloting, and I believe there was one more. Which was that?
Yeah, it was the reapportionment. It was the one that would
reapportionment. That's right.
It took an incredibly partisan Democratic reapportionment and made it more partisan. Yes. And that got defeated, and that actually played a role in our winning this past year the lawsuit, so we ended up with a fair reapportionment. So I think New York City is New York City is one of the progressive hubs of the East Coast, but I'm just suggesting that there's evidence that we are doing better here than really a lot of the Democrats would like to admit. I think when you get into the Mid-Hudson, I think we're going to have 3 wins. I think Michael Lawler is going to get elected to Congress. I think Colin Schmidt's going to get elected to Congress. And Mark Molinaro is running in a special election next Tuesday, where I believe he's going to end up winning, which will actually put the Republicans in the House of Representatives within 4 or 5 seats of a majority next week. So I do feel that is happening. I do know that there is a likelihood that they will pick up a state Senate seat in the Mid-Hudson, if not 2. You get up to the Albany area, you got Liz Joy running against Congressman Tonko, exceptional candidate. You also have state Senate seats in play in that area. My general prediction is the state Senate's going to pick up 5 to 8 seats, and that eliminates this supermajority that the Democrats have used to their political advantage, to the people's
disadvantage
of the states.
Well, let me ask you, Jerry. Let me ask you. That's a very good political analysis, but I want to talk to you about a couple issues that bother me terribly. One is this congestion pricing.
Oh yeah.
Legislation that they're pushing through, and Governor Hochul says she's not going to do anything to slow it down or to re-examine it. What are your thoughts about congestion pricing?
I live in Brooklyn. Absolutely disgraceful. So right now, for me to go into Manhattan, I pay. If I take the Brooklyn Bridge, it's free, and if I take the Battery Tunnel, I pay like a certain round trip with my Easy Pass. What will happen here is that I will go to $23 and I think 75 cents. Where if I take I think I'm like around $13. That's an extra $10. If I take the Brooklyn Bridge, it's going to be $23.75 or something. And to be honest with you, it's nothing now. So why do I need another tax on me? It is not unusual for me to make a quick trip into the city once a week or twice a week. It is not unusual at all. I don't need to take a subway to Midtown where I can get in and out faster by car. I mean, this is about me, the taxpayer, not about Manhattan. They used to call them limousine liberals, but now I guess they're bus liberals or A-train liberals or something. I don't know. I just know that if I have to spend an extra $1,000 a year going into Manhattan and my neighbor's the same, and I don't even go in regularly, that is another tax on me. And in Long Island, it's not going to be any better, and a lot of people don't want to take the subways anymore. I was talking to a lady this morning about the Long Island Railroad who actually lives in East Hampton, and she's willing to take the Long Island Railroad in, but she has no intention of transferring from that railroad onto a subway. So she isn't coming in by mass transit, and it's just not going to happen. So, I mean, it is a disaster.
Well,
Jersey's got its complaints.
In fact, Jersey has a problem. All the suburbs have a problem. Connecticut has a problem.
There's an additional issue. Torres in the Bronx, they talk about environmental justice. It's not environmental justice if all of a sudden, because of a plan, hundreds, if not thousands, of new vehicles don't come into the city during a normal route and start figuring out a way to come in through the South Bronx and any minority area. I mean, because of just the way it hooks up in Manhattan, it is incredibly thoughtless.
It's a pollution creator.
Right. And their planning was done in 2019. That's when they did it. They did it before the pandemic. So let's get real. This is just another revenue source for the MTA to cover their bond covenants because they know they can't. How many times can they push back the bonds? How many times can they do that? Or on the precipice of some sort of default that the government cannot allow, and you and me are going to pick up the coverage. I don't see as much in terms of buses and capital as I see as much in debt service.
And you also have the problem of we're trying to recover from the COVID economic disaster, and you can discourage tourism. That's going to be an awful problem on the tourism. Because tourism in the city is not just somebody flying in from Germany. It's about those shows on Wednesday afternoons and every night. I mean, when I say I go into the city, I'm usually going in for a meeting or something where I'm having a meal or with my wife going to see a show. That is good. Look, will I still go in? Absolutely. But I'm just simply saying to you, because I'm going to go in. But why did they do this to me? Why should they do this to me? Why should they do this to Jesse? Why should they do this to you? Well, by the way, and I live in Manhattan, but if I go below 60th Street, I get hit too. So
exactly.
The only winner here is the MTA, which has mismanaged their budget, both capital and expense, and getting them a revenue grab at the expense of the larger issues and the tax-paying public.
Correct.
Let me ask you this last question before we take the break. What's the best argument you can make as a person who understands government and public policy why it's essential that we do not have a one-party state?
Because it's the only way you get balance, and incredibly inept ideas are either slowed down or stopped. And I will say New York has definitely become a cesspool of bad ideas.
Jesse.
Jerry, I truly appreciate it. And you're right about the cesspool of bad ideas. And those bad ideas are now being replicated in other parts of the country, which now everyone is feeling. But we're the test bed here for this type of stuff. Yeah. As we see the Zeldin race going on, you mentioned New York State because as we've been seeing, and whether you do polling or not do polling, just the reaction of voters when they see Lee Zeldin in his quest for running for governor, you see him making inroads in the Asian community. You see him making inroads in the Hispanic community. Yeah. You see him making inroads in the members of the Jewish community that have not traditionally been Republican. We see that his message, and I want to make sure I'm not just just having the party line, because we've seen it here, but his message is resonating and it's crossing over party lines in the city, which is helping him build a bigger base in the city that will help him in upstate in his quest.
Well, I agree with you. I've also had the opportunity, although I don't travel with Lee, I do have some level of coordination with his schedule. So I do intercept him in different parts of the state. So, I'm not, giving you the Brooklyn perspective. I think I see this anywhere I go. I've actually, I've been interacting with him on the trail for over a year. I don't actually believe I've seen him go anywhere where he hasn't gotten a good reception. And the crowds, some of the crowds are extraordinarily large. I mean, he doesn't get a bad crowd anywhere, but sometimes he gets like these incredibly large crowds. So that to me shows enthusiasm for his message and, frankly, the desire to have change here.
Well, Gerard Kassar, chairman of the State Conservative Party, Jesse and I are delighted that you've shared some time with us on the Long Island Report. We appreciate what you do for New York City and for New York State. We appreciate your wisdom and your experience. On behalf of Jesse and myself, once again, we want to thank you. As we get further into the fall, if you'll make yourself available, Jesse and I would love to have you come back on.
I would be honored. Thank you.
Okay. This is the Long Island Report. We're taking a short break. We'll be back in a little while. We've been very privileged to have Gerard Kassar, the chairman of the State Conservative Party, with us for this segment. Chairman Garcia and I will be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse, we had a very interesting segment with Gerard Kassar, who's the state chair of the Conservative Party. And I think his take and his analysis was very interesting. What do you think?
Listen, he's one of the smartest guys in government and politics. I've known him since 1994. Him and Mike Torres, who's my counterpart in the Conservative Party here in Suffolk County, whenever it's always good to have them with you working side by side, because they're the ones that talk to you straight, and they give you a straight analysis on things. They don't tell you what people want to hear. So that's, this partnership we've been developing, in the state and in our county, and it started in our town. Is one that's been proving very successful, not just for our political parties, more importantly, the policies are based on the representatives we're now electing. Like electing a Ray Tierney in Suffolk County as a new district attorney, a new Republican majority in this Suffolk County legislature for the first time in 16 years. It's the people of Suffolk County now that are benefiting and from this partnership, and we're going to see that when we elect Lee Zeldin, the governor of the state of New York. We're going to see the people benefit from that partnership and his policies as well.
Well, I'm hopeful that the Republicans will pick up a substantial number of seats in the state Senate to get over these supermajorities that the Democrats have in both houses of the state legislature. And I think Gerard Kassar said it right and echoed what you and I have been talking about for months now, the danger of one-party government and the tremendous harm it can do on every levels of life that we face, whether you're talking about public safety and law enforcement, whether you're talking about congestion pricing, whether you're talking about overtaxation, whether you're talking about destroying the integrity of local communities by trying to push through state legislation, domination of local zoning by by state government. When zoning, everybody knows that zoning is a local issue, Jerry. I'm sorry.
It is.
Jesse.
We don't want a bureaucrat in Albany to tell us. They're already telling us too much to do with our kids and our lives in general, whether it be mandates or critical race theory. We don't need them now telling us, how our community should be shaped. They've screwed up the state. Let's not screw up our neighborhood.
Well, and look, as I talked to you about in the first segment of the show, Jesse, look what you have running for the United States Senate in the state of Pennsylvania. You have a wild-eyed left-wing Democrat who wants to legalize all drugs. So let's talk about the relationship between the state of Pennsylvania and the state of New York. You go upstate to upstate New York, and you have the overlap, the geographic connection between the state of Pennsylvania and the state of New York. So if these people get hopped up on drugs and they go over the state border and they crash into somebody in their family in a car and wipe out a family because they're hopped up on drugs, because it's a great idea that people have legalized drugs. First of all, legalized drugs don't work because the black market will take it over. The gangsters will take over the drug market because they will undersell and underprice the drugs. And there's no quality control of drugs, so people don't know what they're taking. When you buy drugs off the street, Jesse, you're buying stuff that's laced with God knows what kind of poison. This is a good idea to allow that, the possession and the sale of drugs. And you don't think that going forward in the state of Pennsylvania is to impact upstate New York?
Absolutely. It's going to impact upstate New York. And then, if we don't make changes here in the state of New York, we'll do a copycat legislation. With Democrats and these radical ideas that they have, they want to they're tearing apart the very fabric of our communities and of our families and our neighborhoods. And we need to stand up and say no to these individuals and these policies, because it's going to rip this country apart. We won't be able to recognize what we're leaving our children in these cases. So I find it unbelievable. I mean, Democrats want to keep our borders open, make drugs easily accessible and not criminal. They want to defund the police. They want to do cashless bail. Once you see these policies going forward in one state, it's one state after another, those blue states that could, at one point, bring it across the nation, and there will be no place in this country we can live.
Well, and then the Democratic Party, the Biden White House and the Democrats in the state legislatures are pushing for it, and certainly in Congress, both the House and the Senate, they want to get rid of the Electoral College. Well, the Electoral College is the only thing that protects us against the crazies in California, New York, and Illinois. Look what the electoral. It's a protection because the supermajority people in California and New York and Illinois can govern the whole country with their policies if there's no Electoral College for balance.
Democrats' basic playbook is they yell racism, and then when they lose, they want to change the conditions of the games. They want to change the rules in the middle of the game. It wasn't Republicans who were saying do away with the Electoral College when Bill Clinton got less than 50% of the popular vote and won a three-way race for president on two occasions. We didn't say get rid of the Electoral College. Let's change the system of government because it's not fair. No, what we did is we decided to change and adapt ourselves to win nationally. And we did that with George W. Bush shortly thereafter. This is the problem with Democrats. When their policies fail and they realize that the citizenry wakes up and realizes how bad that failure is and how they're being impacted negatively, the Democrats don't go in and try and change their failed policies. No, they change the rules to benefit them.
Well,
I said to you, and I've said this to you, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but Cuomo was in trouble, and the state Senate and the state state Assembly was in trouble in 2020. COVID hit, and it allowed Cuomo to weaponize the electoral system by changing it dramatically for the benefit of one party.
Well,
and
that's exactly right. They used it as cover for doing what they wanted to play with voter integrity. And you need to have voter integrity for people to have confidence that their vote counts. You're truly living in a democratic republic. Now, I think one of the best examples of changing the rules of the game is the way they play with filibusters in the Senate, threatening to abolish a filibuster, which is a check against majority tyranny, and the way they threaten when they don't get the court decisions because they no longer can pack the court with the people of their philosophy, their ideology, and they're getting a fair and balanced, objective courts. They now want to change the rules of the game with the court by having term limits on Supreme Court justices and impeaching Supreme Court justices because they don't like the decisions. You didn't see the Republicans saying, let's impeach the justices of the Supreme Court. You didn't see them saying, let's pack the court, let's put in term limits, which is just another way to finesse court packing. I mean, it's ridiculous. Well, I've gotten a high sign.
We had that opportunity when the Supreme Court, ruled that Obamacare was lawful. Republicans railed against the decision.
Twice. Twice, exactly. You're right, Your Honor, twice. So what happens here? The Republicans just made sure that they could win the elections that needed to be done. They won it at the ballot box with the will of the people. Let's not forget, when you win at the ballot box, you win based on the will and the mandate of the people, not a bureaucrat, not a politician, not a dictator in Albany like Cuomo and Hochul. It's not that. It's the will of the people. Just like the decision on Roe versus Wade, as we have discussed this, was not a ban on abortions. It simply said it's a states' right issue. And what happened? The will of the people in Kansas said no. They're going to maintain and keep abortion legal. And that's a deep red state. But the people spoke, and we have to respect the will of the people when they come out to vote and cast their ballot. And that's why the Democrats are fearful, because the people are voting against their policies, they're getting against their party, and they're voting against their radical agenda. That's why the Democrats in Albany and Washington need to do everything they can to change the rules of the game. Well said, Jesse. Kevin gave us that sign of his, that very famous sign. Even when you're on radio, the audience and the listeners can see that sign. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. This is the Long Island Report with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
We're back. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Let's switch gears, Jesse. I want to talk about three issues in this final segment. I want to talk to you about what's going on with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. I want to talk to you about the obsession the Biden administration has on the Iranian deal. And I want to talk to you about the border crisis worsening. Let's see if we can get to those. Let's start with the Russian war against the Ukraine. Your comments.
I think that you got to God bless the people, the Ukrainian military. They have changed the conditions on the ground. They are taking the fight to Putin's Russian forces. They have successfully attacked rearguard bases that are supply bases and such for the Russian military in Crimea. And now Zelensky's even becoming even more forceful and saying, no, my goal is to return Crimea back to Ukraine that was stolen from us back in 2014. This is a significant change of events. And you know what? Shame on the EU, shame on NATO, and shame on the Biden administration if we don't see here these Ukrainians pushing back the global bully of Putin and his army, and us not get involved even more in terms of supplying them with the services, the tactical services that they need to push back this aggression.
Well, two danger points here. Number one, you have the danger of Putin being a chess player, announcing he's accomplished, even though it's nonsense, saying I've accomplished my goals and have a standstill ceasefire, where they will lock in place the territorial gains picked up by the Russians. And then everybody's saying, oh, good, the war's over. We'll have a standstill agreement. We'll have bright lines. But by doing that, Jesse, by having a standstill aggression declared by Putin, a standstill peace temporarily until he can rekindle his forces, you're going to de facto establish lines that will lock in the Ukrainians without their consent. And that's a danger. Another danger, Jesse, is, and I read this today in the Wall Street Journal, it now seems that the Russian and the Chinese, and we knew there was an alliance, there were oil deals and money deals and that kind of stuff because of the boycotts and the sanctions. But now they're going to be doing joint military training maneuvers. What do you think about that?
Well, I think this is nothing new. We've been speaking about this, but it's funny that this happens at this time. The Chinese economy is significantly taking a hit as a result of COVID mandates, shutdown mandates, and the like. They have to save face somewhere, and they've been doing these overflies over and military exercises close to Taiwan to try and elicit a response. And now we knew they were involved with Russia. Now they're engaging in this. Part of this may be just to try and check the rest of the world as these two parts of the axis of evil coming together in exercises. But I have to wonder, what is the wisdom of this? The Russian economy is not what it needs to be. The Chinese economy is not what it needs to be. Now China is forcing Russia, for whatever purposes, in my opinion, I have no basis of this, is that it's more of a show, like a show of force or a show of unity on the global stage. But why is Russia taking resources away from what can't be described other than a stalled offensive on the Ukrainian front? In fact, sometimes, depending on the day, they're losing ground. The attack on the Crimea is a perfect example of that.
No, I think that's right. And of course, I don't know if it's just posture on the part of the leader of North Korea, but he's talking about sending 100,000 volunteers, Korean volunteers, to fight to support Russia. Another problem. Now, I think it's hard to believe that people would be volunteering in North Korea to get themselves killed in the Ukraine for the North Korean dictator. I think it's you go there, we'll blow your head off here. I think it's total
What's
terrorism.
amazing, though, but think about the optics of that. That the pariah of the world, North Korea, has to, for purposes of ingratiating themselves, say, we will send you 100,000 volunteers to defend against an independent, freedom-loving democracy like Ukraine. The problems that's going on in Russia right now with that offensive in Ukraine must be more paramount. At very least, it's got to be a form of embarrassment, not a form of an expression of support, more of an expression of embarrassment to the Russian people, the Russian military, and Putin.
All right, let's switch gears. The Biden administration, absolute obsession about getting an Iranian deal. All they're going to do is give them a green light to have nuclear weapons because it's not an absolute ban. All it is a time frame. That's number one. Number two, they're going to be giving them tens and tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars of money. And what have the Iranians shown they do with that money? They use that money for terroristic purposes. And now we've seen not only terroristic purposes abroad, but then they're now trying to assassinate American leaders. Ambassador Bolton, Secretary of State Pompeo, former Secretary of Defense Salman Rushdie was attacked by, they want to say he's a madman. He's not a madman. He's a true believer who had a Fatah award of $4 million if he could take out Rushdie. And this is the people you want to negotiate a deal with, who are dedicated when they have their demonstrations in the streets, their set-up theatrical demonstrations. What do they keep saying? Death to America, death to Israel. And these are people that John Kerry and Barack Obama and Joe Biden, they want to deal with, and they believe that they're going to get peace in our time. There was much peace in our time with Iran as Neville Chamberlain got against Adolf Hitler. What say you?
I completely agree with you. I mean, look at this. The Democrats, Biden, and every Democrat, chided President Trump for being cozied up or in bed with dictators. The fact of the matter is, it's Biden who's obsessed with a deal with one of the most oppressive dictators there are on this global scale, and has continuously been the first state, the number one state in terms of state-sponsored terrorist attacks against allies and the United States specifically. As you said, how do you deal with a regime that has as part of its causes, of its tenets, of its foundation, a death to America and an assassination attempts against American diplomats and American soldiers and American leaders? It's unbelievable.
Now,
it's unbelievable. Iran
has to be, look, when you step back and you look at this objectively, there's this access of terrorism, there's this access of hostility to Western civilization. The members of that group are Russia and China and Iran and North Korea. And with all the divisiveness in U.S. politics and all the subversion that's going on in this great country, with that eternal goal of those powers to subjugate us and destroy Western civilization, and we're fighting amongst ourselves about nonsensical issues, that a male is not a male and a female is not a female, and woke culture and identity politics and quotas. I mean, we're out of our minds because we're going to wake up and we're going to lose the big war, which is for Western civilization. And Jesse, this is a fight that we're going to have to fight. The only question is, do we fight it when we're strong, or are we going to fight it when we're weak, or we're just going to be subjugated like all dictators try to do, subjugate weak people? And I hate to sign off.
I vote that we fight well. I'm sorry, but I vote that we fight while we're strong. And I will tell you that we had Iran in check when President Trump had his foreign policies in place. We took on ISIS. He eliminated ISIS. We now see the resurgence of ISIS. He was bringing peace to the Middle East. Now we have more discord in the Middle East than ever before.
And he gave the Taliban and Al Qaeda Afghanistan with $60 or $80 billion worth of armaments. Just
Absolutely.
Gave it away.
Some of the top armaments we have. Unbelievable.
It's just awful.
It's a shame and it's a shock.
Well, Jesse, another great show. I deeply appreciate your wisdom and your commentary. We'll be back next week. This is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off for Chairman Garcia and myself. We wish you and your family good health and long life and peace. We'll be speaking with you again next week. Thank you for listening.